Hello, I'm Rebecca the Maths Lady, here to help you become an expert maths teacher so that all your children love maths and become fluent, creative and confident with it. This is the 15th and second to last video in the series on teaching maths to children who are 6 or 6 to 7 years old, and in this video we're going to talk all about how we consolidate the year's learning of maths and prepare children to be ready for their next year at maths learning when things are really going to speed up a lot. In this video I'll cover 3 things. The first is the consolidation of the maths that we've learnt this year. Then I'll cover the transition process, which is really crucial at this stage. I'll talk about the key mathematical skill children need to have acquired to thrive in their next year of maths learning, and also about how we manage the transition for children who are struggling. And finally, in this video, I'll talk about preparing children for tests, because hopefully a lot of you don't have to deal with high stakes testing at this stage, so you can just skip that part of the video and go straight to the final video in this series, which is all about managing people. That's the children, the parents, and all the adults you work with, as well as yourself. Right, let's get started. So it's really wise to go through a stage late in the year which is about consolidating the key mathematical skills that children have learnt this year. Essentially, you need a good resource of questions which cover all those skills and some strategies for working with them wisely. So here's just one example of what that might look like. I particularly like and recommend these Propeller Rapid Recall board packs. This board with the yellow border focuses on Year 1 math skills, and this board with the blue border focuses on Year 2 math skills. And it's wise to have resource banks for both, because obviously children are really just beginning to become confident with writing numbers, and it's good to start with easier skills rather than challenge them both with their reading and writing skills and with their math skills too quickly. So the way these boards work is that you give children a number from 1 to 10, say we gave them 7 in the cloud, and they then copy that number into all the other clouds on that side of the board. And then they complete the questions for that number. So here it says, trace the number name and draw a circle around it. So they've got to find the word for the number 7, and they've got to trace it and draw a circle around it. And on the back of this Year 1 board there are some different types of question, and you as the teacher have to choose a number between 5 and 20. So it's a really lovely resource. It's beautifully presented, and children love the fact that they can wipe away their mistakes so easily because it's a dry white pen. And in using this resource, I would first of all have pairs of children working together, taking turns to hold the pen to prompt discussion, so they're not just working on their own part of the board. And this will help them puzzle out what's going on and help them have a positive experience with this work. And then gradually I'd work towards children working on this individually. If I didn't have enough boards, I'd try to get groups doing that while other groups are doing something different. And once they've established confidence with the Year 1 skills, I'd move them onto the Year 2 board, where first of all you have to choose a number between 10 and 20 on one side of the board, and then between 20 and 50 on the other side of the board. And there are some great questions. By Year 2 we're moving on to more abstract calculations. These are just written as digits, and some children may be ready to work in that way, but it's perfectly normal for children to need apparatus, and you should always give it to them where that's needed. So for example, for these calculations you might give them a reckon rec or 10 frames. But where you find children are relying on apparatus, it's also good to try to have days when you can't find the apparatus, and you work with them to try to teach them to draw pictures of that apparatus as a visual stage to move them on from the concrete into a way of doodling diagrams of the concrete so that they'll be able to manage without that apparatus in the future. As with all the products I recommend, I'm not paid to recommend them. That's not the way I work. I just choose products that I think are great and publicise them. But I do accept free samples of products if you want to send them to me. So hopefully that helps you have a clear picture in your mind of what really good consolidation of the key math skills up to this point in the learning journey looks like. My point here is not to tell you that you have to buy these resources. It is just to inspire you to be able to imagine what great consolidation work looks like so that you can do what's right for the children in front of you in your classroom. So that was the first part of this video about consolidating the core mathematical skills that children have been learning. The second part of the video is about managing the transition between this year of maths teaching and the next. And there are really two things you need to do. The first is to focus on one particular maths skill, and that is the subordination of partitioning. Up to this point in time, you've been doing lots and lots of work on partitioning the numbers up to 10 and knowing the 8 partitions as 1 and 7, 2 and 6, 3 and 5, and so on. In order to be ready for the next year of maths teaching, children need to be using those partitions so fluently that they're not even thinking about them. And the most obvious test for this is when they're doing calculations like these ones, 68 add 5. They need to be not counting on 1 at a time anymore. They need to be adding 2 and then adding 3 because they can see the partition of 5 and they can see how that gives them a sneaky shortcut. In the third video in this series, we did lots of work on how we work with counting beads so that children see the structure of what's going on. And of course, we went on from the addition questions to the subtraction questions, which consolidate all this even further. Now, it's absolutely crucial that children learn to use these sneaky shortcuts of subordinating partitioning, partitioning numbers up to 10 and using those results without that being the key thing they're focusing on in the question. Because as they move on in maths, they're going to be moving on quite quickly to more complex calculations. And the children who are going to cope with that are the ones who are using these sneaky shortcuts and are not counting on or back 1 at a time for their small calculations within the bigger calculations. And those children will use those shortcuts, the partitioning of small numbers, all the time, and those results are practiced and they become subconscious. And the children who aren't using them are counting on or back 1 at a time, and they're no longer practicing those small results and they forget them. And so it's really common that at the next stage of learning maths, classes split into the children who are just flying and the children who are wading through treacle. And this is the essence of why that happens. So here's a link to the video where I explained the teaching of this skill earlier in this series, and it'll be in the description of this video, which you can't always see on your mobile phone, but you can always get on a laptop if that link isn't working for you and you need to look at this topic. And of course, these worksheets are free to download, and you can find where if you go to the About tab for this video. But if there's one skill that children need at the end of this year of teaching, it is this one. And I hope I've explained why. The other part of managing transition is understanding what to do with the children who are not coping with this and are not yet managing to work in the visual or the abstract and still need apparatus. And there are really 4 things you need to do with these children. One is to work with their next teacher to make sure they're aware that these children still need apparatus. The second is that you need to check that these children have achieved good motor sensory integration, and you need to make everyone aware if they haven't. I always refer to this book, The Maze of Learning, which explains it really well, but here's a link to a video that I made with Charlotte Davies, who's one of the authors of this book, about diagnosing and intervening if children's brains are not yet correctly integrating their different visual and audio inputs. The third thing is you need to talk to these children's parents and make them aware of what you found. Encourage them in particular to play games with small numbers over the summer. It's such an obvious win and it does really help. And the final 4th thing is, of course, that you need to give them loads of love and encouragement and praise for the great maths that they can do. Okay, so the third and final part of this video is all about preparing children for tests like these. So if you're lucky enough to live in a country or teach in a school where these are not needed, you do not need this section of the video and you can skip straight to the final video in this series. So the key thing to understand about high stakes tests like these is that they should not exist for 6-year-olds. In England, about 1/3 of the children doing these tests are just 6 when they do them. And it's really common for some 6-year-olds not to be ready to deal with abstract questions like these and still to need apparatus. Assessment at this stage should be about teachers recording detailed profiles of what children can and can't do, rather than about single scores that really tell them nothing. And of course, we live in an age of technology where it's perfectly possible to record and appropriately share much more detailed information about children's progress than a single score. But in England, we do have these tests. The key architect of these tests is this man, Schools Minister Nick Gibb. He chose to rewrite the English primary maths curriculum to make it much harder than anywhere else in the world and to change the curriculum without it being trialled. He then chose to remove children's right to use apparatus in these exams, and so he made these tests a really terrible experience for some children. And a huge amount of work has been done by an awful lot of people to try and get rid of these tests. And hopefully we will get there, but we're not there yet. Your key job as a teacher is always to be positive and confident and to make it fun, but also to reassure children who are finding them difficult and their parents, especially if those children are just young. But if you are in a position where you have to prepare your children for these tests, then you want to take it on in the same kind of way that I've described with the concept check boards. Get children working on them in pairs. Give them apparatus if they need apparatus for as long as possible, and then try and get them to draw diagrams of the apparatus. So for this one, 64 subtract 11, you could encourage them to learn to draw their sticks of 10 and to cross out the 11 and to see what's left. I know there's a lot of pressure on teachers to try and use standard column methods, and if you're working with children who are ready for that, that's fine. But if you're working with the children who aren't, it's not okay to push them to the abstract just for that reason. You have to concentrate on the visual, and then hopefully they can get the right answer. There's only 1 mark for this question, so it's only for the answer however they get it. And with a question like this, 14 divided by 2, obviously they can either draw pairs and count the number of pairs, or they can draw 2 circles and share their 14 objects into those 2 circles and see how many are in each circle. So try to get children working in pairs or groups, at least at first. Try to get them to draw diagrams, try to make it fun, and always maintain a degree of distance from how realistic it is that your youngest children who are struggling most are actually going to be able to cope properly with this test. So quick summary of this video: you want to consolidate the core maths skills that children have learned up to this point in time. Then you want to focus in particular on subordinating partitioning so that children become fluent in that to get them ready for the next stage of learning. You need to identify the children who can't yet work without apparatus and make sure that their future teachers are aware, that you're looking at whether they've achieved motor sensory integration, that you're talking to their parents, and that those children are getting a lot of support. And finally, if you have got high stakes exams, I've given you some practical strategies for approaching them wisely. But in short, don't build your whole year around them, because there is no way of ensuring that all children, including the youngest children who are struggling most, are going to be able to cope properly with those tests. They were never designed for that. If you'd like to see the lists of all the free videos and worksheets that I've uploaded to the internet, just go to the About tab for this YouTube channel. If you'd like to be able to find this channel again, please subscribe to it. If you've time to give us a like, that would be awesome. Hugely value your comments if you've time to share them. And if you know people who you think might benefit from seeing this or other videos that I've made, please do share them with them. Thank you so much for the time you're putting in to your professional development. I hope you love your maths teaching. Take care. Bye for now.